it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to be doing a technique that I usually use with stamps, but today we are going to make it work with stencils. Now, the shadow stamping technique is one of my absolute favorites in stamping. I am going to show you today how you can do this with more of a mask stencil, like the Frostbite Simon Hurley one on the left, and then kind of more intricate ones like the bubble one in the center, and then also a little bit more delicate ones like the one on the right. So we can do this with all the different kinds, but first of all, I just want to quickly refresh your memory around shadow stamping. So I have my leaf canopy stamp set here by Altenew. This is just one of my absolute favorites if I had to pick. And shadow stamping in general is where you are going to need a white pigment ink. Pigment ink tends to work best because it sits on top of your cardstock, and you are going to make sure it is nicely inked up. You stamp down the white pigment ink, then give it a second to dry, or use your heat gun if you're impatient, or if you're super impatient like me, then I sometimes just leave it and it does work out just fine. Then I'm going to take some Purple Delight VersaFine Clear ink. Now this is also a pigment ink, and you are going to ink up the same stamp that you used, except for you offset it just a little bit. So I'm going to move my stamp kind of up and to the right. This doesn't have to be perfect at all, but you can see you get a gorgeous darker shadow. You also get the original white to the very, very left, and then you get this crossover color between the two that becomes the bulk of the image. So a really, really nice technique, but as I said, we are going to be trying it with some stencils. Now this stencil here is called, this is from the Fairy Hug Stencils, and this is called Fairy Bubbles. Now, really cute little stencil, and I'm not sure if I've seen too much from this company before, but I like the look of this one, and I know that we can make this work. So I'm going to be working with some craft cardstock today, just really because the white ink is going to show up really well on this. I'm also going to show you how you can do this with some black cardstock as well and get amazing results. So first and foremost, we need to ink up this stencil with our white pigment ink. Now, just because I knew I was going to get messy here, I popped this on a piece of scrap paper. Now today I'm using a finger dauber that I have dedicated to my white pigment ink. It just lives in my little finger dauber holder with all of my other oxide finger daubers, but this one is just for my white pigment ink because I use it fairly regularly. So once I peel this off, you can see it's a gorgeous stencil and it's beautiful as is. But I'm going to put the stencil back where it was and then shift it just slightly to the right. Now it doesn't matter which way you shift it. You could shift it up, you can shift it down, to the left, to the right. Just shift it a couple of millimeters, a really, really small amount to the right in my case. And then I'm going to use those little pieces of mint tape that I have behind my panel and just make sure they are popped down in place. I also hold the stencil with my hand as I'm going because, as I said, this one is fairly delicate. Now I decided to use Distress Oxides to go over top of this, and in the beginning you'll think, I don't really see how this can be leaving much behind. I'm kind of colouring in all of the white ink and I can't really see where there's anything going on. I'm just sort of smudging the white ink and the oxides all together. I'm not really sure here, but just wait and you'll see in just a second. I decided to do rainbow for no other decision other than I like it, and it looked really fun. Truth be told, they were already sitting on my desk from the previous project, and so that is often, more often than I like to admit, what inspires my next project. Now this here, once you take off the stencil, you can see a slight little shadow of the white ink as well as the original craft cardstock underneath and then the colour. So I absolutely love that. It creates a gorgeous look, but now I'm going to show you what it might look like if you decide to do it on some black cardstock. Now I love the stencil. It is very delicate and very fine, and you're wondering how can you make that work when there's barely enough room to kind of shift the stencil over and still see some of the white. So I thought I would show you an example. I am again just popping the white through. I'm just doing it no particular way, just making sure that all of the stencil is covered in white. In the end, you might want to choose to do just a specific piece of your stencil instead of covering your whole page and make it more of like a focal point. But anything, of course, is going to work. I'm just doing the whole stencil here, and of course I will make these into cards as well. And then when you take this off, I mean, even this pattern even the white on the black background looks stunning. So I was very tempted to create a few of these and pop them off to the side for later, but I am going to keep going. So I popped my stencil back on top. I think I actually heat set this one a little bit with my heat gun, just because I was doing this straight away, so I didn't want to wait and let the pigment ink dry at all. So I just zapped it quickly with my heat gun. Then I'm going to pop this back over top. I'm using a couple of different blues. This is the VersaFine Clear inks. These are, of course, a pigment ink, so they are a little bit different than the Distress Oxides that we used before. Distress Oxides are more of a hybrid ink between dye and pigment. They have kind of properties from both, so I thought I would just show you. Both of them are going to work just fine. It depends what you have in your stash. I decided to do kind of the flowers blues, a couple of different blues, and then I did the leaves and the twirls and swirls kind of green just for a little bit of fun. But obviously you can use any colors here at all. I am again just using finger daubers because these are fairly small spaces to get into. I added a little bit of dark green at the very last minute, and then when I lift this up you can still see some of that gorgeous white and then the color shining over top. I absolutely love this. I think this looks very intricate. So the last but not least, I'm going to quickly show you this one. This is the Simon Hurley Frostbite. Now, of course, the whole thing does not fit on my A2 panel. It is a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel at the moment, and I'm just putting down my white pigment ink. I decided when I had shifted the stencil over a little bit to create the shadow that I would come in with lots of different colors of blues. I went back to the Distress Oxides, so I'm using Tumble Glass. I really just used a whole range of blues that were sitting beside me. This kind of reminded me, I guess, frost is what I think of blues, but it could be any colors. And of course, I mean, because you can only see a portion of this, it really just looks like a pattern rather than frost or snow or snowflake or anything like that. If you had a bigger card front or if you positioned it differently, it might look a little different, but to me this just kind of looks like a cool symmetrical pattern on here. But nonetheless, it is going to look gorgeous when we lift this off, and I love the reveal. The reveal is one of my favorite things. You can see that beautiful white shadow, then the mix where the white and the colors have mixed together, and then of course the craft original cardstock as well. So this is a really, really fun technique, and it works perfectly well with stencils too. Now I'm going to finish these off into some cards for you. So I'm going to start off by using the rainbow one to create into a card. Now I have this stamp here. This is a new one to me called Fairy Teacup. Now, I have had so many emails and so many people recommend that I try the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks. So I decided to go ahead and try 3 to begin with. I just purchased the SEAFOAM, the Surf, and the Ocean. So basically a light, a medium, and a dark. And I'm going to be trying these out today and trying them over the next little while to see what I think. I'm going to pop my little teacup into my stamping platform, and then I'm going to stamp this with the kind of middle colored ink Surf, and I'm going to stamp it once and I get pretty good results. Now, in all honesty, in the past I haven't found that I get very good results from stamping dye inks. I'm sure that's got something to do with me, and I can't say I've tried every single ink on the market. I have tried a lot of the popular ones. So often if you see me stamping, it will usually be with the VersaFine Clear inks, because those are the ones that I find most reliable. And honestly, I get very frustrated quickly when things don't work well. So for me, struggling with dye inks is something that I've just sort of avoided and found another way around it, and that was by using the pigment inks. But I must admit, this stamped beautifully, and I was pretty surprised. I then popped a little bit of the SEAFOAM colour, which is the lightest one, down onto an acrylic block, and I coloured in a couple of extra little bits and pieces just to give the cup a little bit more colour and variation. Then I decided that I would fussy cut out this image. So I'm using my little Cutter Bee fussy cutting scissors, and I did indeed decide to do inside that handle. I used a craft knife to help me out a little bit, but I was determined that I wanted to get inside this handle as well. And then I kind of gently went around it with the craft knife and then finished off a little bit with my scissors, and I think it looked pretty good in the end. I'm going to do my little trick with the adhesive so that I can get this perfectly lined up on a white card base. This card base is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm going to bring in a white sentiment, so I want there to be a little bit of that white around the border. I have die cut out a plain vellum circle, and I'm going to pop my teacup on there just to help it stand out from a very bold and colourful background. I pop a little bit of foam on there just so that it can stand up off the background, and then from here the sentiments that I'm going to use are going to be some fun ones that I picked up recently as well. Now these are kind of sentiment strips, I guess. You can cut them into beautiful long strips, and if you've been watching my channel you'll know that I love the paper rose ones. I have been using those for months and months and months on the same packets. They are lasting me forever, and I make a lot of cards, so I was really pleased with those. But I saw this range and thought that I would give this a go. I believe there are 4 or 5 pages in each packet. There are a few different packets that I got, and I will of course link these down below in case you're interested in checking them out and reading the sentiments a little bit more closely. But I opened up 2 of the packets, and one of them has these kind of quick-witted sentiments, I guess, and so with the person that I knew this was going to, I knew that they would appreciate this kind of sentiment added to their card. Not everybody does, that's for sure, so make sure that you know the recipient. But I have got a gorgeous happy birthday up the top, and then the next one down says age is just a number, and in your case a really big one. And so as I said, I knew who this was going to, and I knew that they would find this funny, so I thought this worked out perfectly fine with the teacup on the front. But absolutely gorgeous. These sentiments are really easy and clear, lots of different fonts, and a really good range. I was impressed, and there are many more packets than what I purchased. I just decided to try some of them out, and these are the ones that I think I would use most often. Now I thought I would quickly put together the black one as well. This was probably my next favorite. I really love the look of that black, and I didn't even really want to cover up much of the front of it because it was stunning really just the way it is. So again, I'm going to pop some adhesive on the back and pop this down onto a card base. I decided again to go with a white card base, and this time I have cut the front panel down to be 3 3/4 inches by 5. Then what I did is use some square dies to create a frame. I cut them out 3 or 4 times to stack them up and make a nice gorgeous thick frame. And then I really just framed that front part in the middle because I absolutely love that sort of centerpiece of that stencil, and so I really didn't want to do too much to this card at all. This was another birthday wishes card, another happy birthday card, and so I just trimmed the sentiment down a little bit, and it's going to fit perfectly across the front of that square. And that wraps up my shadow stamping with stencils video for today. I hope you have enjoyed this one. Of course, I will have links down below. Let me know what you think and if you've tried this. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!